The Star and D'Amico Show is brought to you by cheapesttshirts.ca. If you're looking for quality gear without overpaying, shop cheapesttshirts.ca. Huge selection for men, women, and kids. Tees, hoodies, headwear, bags, and more. Proud Montreal business. Order today, ship today, delivery tomorrow. That's cheapesttshirts.ca. Local, fast, and affordable. Brought to you by instacustoms.com. Do you need custom gear from a local Montreal business? Instacustoms.com has you covered. Custom shirts, hoodies, hats, and more made your way. Fast turnaround, great quality, and proudly Montreal-based. Check out instacustoms.com. Brought to you by Cabletel. For trusted alarm systems in Quebec and Eastern Ontario, choose Cabletel. Over 20 years of expert installation and top-tier protection for homes and businesses. Check out Cabletel.com. Email them info@Cabletel.com. It's Cabletel. Peace of mind you can count on. Brought to you by Morella's Steakhouse. Looking for an unforgettable night out? Morella's Steakhouse on Highway 132. It's just 15 minutes from Montreal, serving up premium cuts and bold flavors, and no tax on your bill. Book your table tonight at morellassteakhouse.ca. Taste excellence tonight. Brought to you by Little Bear. Give your pet the best with Little Bear Pet Supply. It's a proudly family-owned business here in Montreal for over 30 years. Chuck, Evie, and their all-star staff have you taken care of with all the top brands at the best prices, and they really care for your pets. Shop online at littlebearonline.com or visit them on St. Catherine across from Westmount Square. It's Little Bear Pet Supply. Brought to you by McLean's Pub. Head over to McLean's Pub, 1210 Peel Street in the heart of downtown Montreal. Great food, cold drinks, and big games on all the screens. McLean's Pub, good times and great company. There he is, Marco D'Amico. I'm Sean Starr. Welcome back to the Star and D'Amico Show. You can follow us on all your favorite social platforms. Marco, we're all over the TikTok, as they say, and the Instagram, and of course, X, formerly known as Twitter, right? I never sounded older in my life. But yeah, kiddies, what it do? Good to be with you. Lots to get into today. Don't forget, you can like and subscribe if you love your daily Habs content right here on the Star and D'Amico Show on YouTube.com and wherever you get your audio podcasts. We're available there as well. Marco D'Amico at rg.org reporting late last week on Nazem Kadri, on the Nazem Kadri front. You know, like, I like this player. I've been very vocal. I like the Kadri. Yes, I understand the age and the contract, Marco, but what's the latest on the Canadiens and the Calgary Flames as it relates to Nazem Kadri from what you've been reporting?
Well, we keep hearing that the Canadiens are interested in Nazem Kadri. And I would say this. Do they like the player? Yes, they do. Are they calling Calgary consistently to be like, what's going on today? What's going on? No. There was, I would say, a more notable interest in the month of November where they did check in on Nazem Kadri. Since then, two things have happened. Number one, Oliver Kapanen playing very well in the 2C slot.
Yeah.
You know, really good chemistry with Ivan Demidov and Juraj Slafkovsky.
18 goals.
And number two, and this was one of the main reasons why it all kind of fit, but number two, the acquisition of Phil Danault.
Right.
And so I'll break it down for logistical purposes. Before we get into the contract, before we get into the logistics, this is why the Canadiens like Nazem Kadri. Number one, top 6 scoring center. Now, as we look at him right now, having a down year in terms of scoring compared to last year, 35 goals last year, he's on pace for about, 16, 17 goals right now. Hopefully he picks up the pace for himself. Number two, the experience. Won a cup, right? Plays center. And if you all remember this channel back in September, October, left shot center. And Phil Danault is a left shot center. Oliver Kapanen has almost double his goal count right now, right? With 18 goals. So the need for Nazem Kadri has maybe gone down in the short term. And I think that's what's essentially happened here. Things have cooled on that front because the player has cooled on that front. So what do you get into in that sense? What happens at that point? Well, you kick the can down the line and you see what ends up happening. But I could tell you, like right this second, the Canadians aren't rushing to give GM Craig Conroy a king's ransom for Nazem Kadri.
I mean, for a minute, the Canadians were looking around to your reporting on Kadri. Blake Coleman seemed to be a hot name for a minute, and that's obviously cooled well down, right? But around the National Hockey League, as it relates to Kadri's years left and his age, how many realistic options do you think Craig Conroy has if he wants to move it? And some of the reporting, and you mentioned this, like Kadri has put his hand up. He says, "Listen, if you can find a trade partner, I'm willing to make it happen, essentially." But is there a realistic world, a matchup that a team that you can look at today is going to green light go a Kadri trade with all of those age and contract and money's owed?
The moment I saw the Artemi Panarin trade not include LA's 2026 first round pick, the Los Angeles Kings are a team that make a ton of sense for Nazem Kadri because they're doubling down on players in their 30s. They're going to lose
Mm.
Anze Kopitar at the end of the year. He's retiring, and they don't have any other options for top six center outside of Quinton Byfield. Like I could appreciate Alex Laferriere and Alex Turcotte. I can, but I don't think that's where they could go if they hope to win. So you have all these players that you've signed as free agents. You have an aging core. You have two options: burn it down or double down.
Right.
And with the Panarin trade, I think the LA Kings are doubling down. So watch out for LA in that regard. Another team that I would venture to look at that are going all in are the Minnesota Wild. Minnesota
Mm.
Wild have their 2027 first round pick still on the table. Charlie Stramel is doing fantastic at Michigan State this season. So a player to watch for. No matter what they trade, that's going to be the top prospect everyone's going to ask for. So watch out for Minnesota. The Calgary Flames have also had conversations with the Detroit Red Wings. Detroit is looking for a 2C. They thought it was going to be a player like Marco Casper. Unfortunately, couldn't follow up his strong end of season last year. This year has been moved to the wing. In fact, in the late stages before the break, Andrew Kopp currently their second line center, and I just don't know how you can keep up with Tampa Bay if Andrew Kopp is your second line center. With due respect to the player, I think he's just a very very strong third line center or a drop and play second line winger, but I don't think he's a 2C for that regard. And then the team that's forever looking for a number two center, the Carolina Hurricanes. They have the cap space, they have the young assets, they have the willingness. They were in on Artemi Panarin. They were trying really hard to get him. They've been trying to make like a splash
Yep.
trade dating back to
Rantanen. Yeah.
basically
Yeah.
the moment Rantanen was traded, they wanted to turn around and try to
Yeah.
make a bigger deal. Unfortunately, could not. So that's a team to watch. They would like to improve at center as well. So there are a few teams, and then there's some that I potentially haven't mentioned. You look at Utah, for example, the Utah Mammoth, dark horse team to watch because I don't know that they're sold with Barrett Hayton being the number two center long term. And I don't know that they think that Caleb Dinwiddie is going to be a player that will jump in and play for them right away. Former fourth overall pick last summer. Well, he could potentially play in the NHL next year. He is doing well in the queue. But to be a number two center, like if the Canadians have concerns about Michael Hage jumping in as a 20-year-old in the number two center slot, maybe Utah kind of has the same idea when it comes to Caleb Dinwiddie at 19. So with that said, they have had conversations with the Calgary Flames over Nazem Kadri. And so this is why I continue to say I am not sold on the idea that the Montreal Canadiens are going to be going all in for Nazem Kadri.
Let me bring it back to Phil Danault for a second. And you're correct to point
Pizza.
out that, the Phil Danault acquisition definitely changed things. But I
Mhm.
wonder, like, I like the transaction, but if I were to argue the other side for fun,
Mhm. Mhm.
in retrospect, was that the right move at the right time? Because, Phil Denault's got a year left at what, 5.5 million. I
Mhm.
mean, how much production can you squeeze out of him for the rest of this year and into next year? And did it block the Montreal Canadiens from hypothetically landing a Nazem Kadri, who I think we can put a dollar on the table and say Nazem Kadri in the hypothetical world, Marco, that he's a Canadian will produce more than Phil Danault. But listen, I mean, Phil Danault's winning his faceoffs. He's doing his job more or less. But how Kadri plays, how he would fit, and even if he does ultimately, before his contract expires, is no longer a top two center on the Canadiens, Marco. I wonder in the alternate universe, if that was the best move the Canadiens could have made.
I think it's a worthwhile conversation. I do.
But you get my point, right? I mean,
I do. I think what I would go and venture to say in this case is, could it have blocked it? Yes. But what was the opportunity cost?
Yeah.
Because I
at
think
that time,
that's what you need to factor in. Phil Danault cost them a second-round pick.
Right.
Nazem Kadri with retention is at minimum a first-round pick and a good prospect roster player, right? So that is a much higher cost. And Nazem Kadri right now, not exactly an asset that is increasing in value because, first of all, there's other centers on the market, right? Vincent Trocheck is going to be available. That's huge, right? That's opened things up significantly. We may see Robert Thomas moved. That opens up trade possibilities as well. We may see Elias Pettersson moved. That opens up trade possibilities as well. So suddenly he went from being the most premium player at center on the market in November to being maybe fourth or fifth on the pecking order. And I think that changes the valuation. But at the same time, you're going to see a couple of teams. I already named 4 or 5 that are looking to improve at center. You're going to see a couple of teams strike out on one and then go to the next on the list and go next on the list and go next on the list. I think eventually Calgary will get their price or close to it. He probably will be traded with retention. But the biggest fear I have with Nazem Kadri is what happens once the decline, and it will happen, eventually starts. And the question is it already happening, considering where the goal totals are now versus last year, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you can't really say, oh, it's because his team is bad. It's the same team as last year. It's the same. He plays with the same kind of players as last year. It's not like they moved anybody out of their top 6 or at least their top line, right? So still the same players, just not getting bailed out by Dustin Wolf like they were last year, but it's still a team that had trouble scoring last year. And so to me, I don't necessarily see the fit in that regard. And Kadri wants to go to a team that's going to be a cup contender like immediately. And I just don't know that that's Montreal either. So when you look at the Minnesota Wild, I see that making sense. When you look at the Carolina Hurricanes, I see that making sense. When you look at the Detroit Red Wings, who are entering the win now, I see that making sense. I just don't see Montreal undressing themselves for that kind of a player when there are other longer term, less risky options available on the market.
There's Marco D'Amico. I'm Sean Starr. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And you can always find this on your favorite audio podcast platforms for daily coverage around the Montreal Canadiens and all things National Hockey League. If I go back to Jeff Gordon's interview with Eric Engels last week, Sportsnet, and he talked about, Gordon did, when the moment arrives, the Canadiens can be aggressive. The broad strokes of more or less what was said in the one-on-one. I don't think that relates to, like, how I interpreted that. I know we're talking about Kadri. I don't think that relates to Nazem Kadri. To me, if I had to guess, I think he's talking about the St. Louis Blues. Like Nazem Kadri, no disrespect to a good player, but at this age and this juncture of Kadri's career, I don't think that's the guy the Canadiens would, air quote, be aggressive for should the moment arise. Am I wrong in my read?
No, it just seems counterintuitive the Canadiens would throw significant assets at a player that's on the downside of his career. You do that when you're contending because it's all in. It's make or break. And the Canadiens aren't at a point where they're all in. And they've said it time and time again. We are not going to mortgage the future for a quick fix. Well, Kadri, my 2 cents, quick fix. And this is why I say it's definitely their interest there has cooled because the vision has cooled. Because Kadri hasn't necessarily maintained the pace that he did last year. And other players on the Canadiens are actually playing better than he is.
Right.
The combination of Oliver Kapanen and Phil Danault, in my opinion, first of all, is worth less on paper. They're combined, I think, make something silly like 6.3 million or 6.4 million versus Kadri making 7 on his own.
Right.
So already that dollar amount, I think the Canadians are very happy with what they have right now. And number two, I just feel like perhaps now they look at it and go, maybe a trade for completing the top line is more in order than anything else, right? Because if you have those higher end wingers, well, then you're able to compete now, and then you can kind of sort it out. But by the time Michael Hage and Alexander Zhuravsky join the Canadians, think of what that top 9 would look like when you might have to push some of these wingers down, or they're on your third line and then you can move them up and down your lineup. That becomes contending level depth. And I think that's what they're looking for.
There's Marco D'Amico, senior editor with RG.org, covering the Montreal Canadiens, and some say the better half of Star and D'Amico on all your favorite social media channels. Marco,
That's
good
cuckoo
stuff as always.
bananas.
I remind you, we're going to be here this week at 3 p.m. For a live breakdown of Team Canada on the men's national program at the Olympics in Milano and Cortina. When they take on Czechia. I wonder, Czechia, a little bit of a dark horse team to me. I can't wait to watch this game on February 12th, and we'll be here on the 12th at 3 p.m. to break this down. As the NHL break goes on, no break here. Marco, thanks as always, man.
Always a pleasure, guys. Have a great day.